Well, hi, I am Elizabeth Halliday, otherwise known as Hallie, and I've known Rod and Randy since 1989. I started dating Rod in October 89, and we were together for 2 years. And one of the things that made me want to be a part of Rod and part of his family was his family. They were so close. They had so much love. They had so much togetherness. And that is something I did not have in my family. It's a very attractive quality that the Richardsons had. We would go to dinner, and I thought it funny that someone said that he had impeccable manners, because one time we were at dinner and Randy, like Rod, ate very fast, and he just wolfed down his food and got up to leave, and Heather said, "Dad, but she's still eating." And he said, "Oh, all right," and sat back down. So thank you, Heather. And I very much appreciated that. One of the most significant interactions that I've had with Randy is that on Sunday nights, Rod and I would go over to their New York City apartment and do our laundry. So that was kind of a Sunday night activity that we very much looked forward to. We'd have dinner and a chicken, and whether Randy was there or not, it was a very nice, homey thing to do. It was kind of a regular thing. And when I was first with Rod, his mother was very ill, so I did not see her. I think it's difficult for someone to meet someone when you're that sick, and her illness involved a lot of pain, so she was not out and about. It was not really a social occasion, so I didn't interact with Pat too much. And some of these wifey duties weren't getting done, and I would sometimes tend to Randy's clothing, and one of our Sunday nights I was sewing his shirt, and he came in. I was watching TV, and I was sitting in the easy chair sewing a button on his shirt, and he came and he sat over me and put his arm on my easy chair, and I said, "Here's your shirt, Randy." And he looked at me and he said, "I think you're going to be very important to me later in my life." And I was. That was Easter of 1990, and his wife died that night. So we got the call the following day. Rod answered the phone, and we had this very nice man go forward, losing someone after having been with them and created so much with them, and watching them suffer and then watching them go. So we were part of the team that remained. And we'd go out to the Hamptons and we would resume. There's certainly a void. And Randy, like Rod, he likes to be with someone. I think they like to have a woman around. And bachelor life was not with him. They like to be independent, but they're not bachelors. So I think Randy was also, he was pulling for me a little bit. After a few months, they began the house renovation project in East Hampton, and it was a very big deal. It involved a lot of demolition and removing furniture. And one day of that weekend, Labor Day weekend, 1991, I was tasked with going to the store to get a few things. And they had this little gray car that was a stick shift, and I didn't depress the clutch all the way, and I turned the car on, and I jumped into gear, and I hit the frame on the garage and broke the frame on the garage. And yeah, I was so scared to walk in to say, I just I crashed the car, and I broke knocking down a building. But he was so kind, and he said, "You know, Hallie, you got to watch that. You got to watch to make sure the clutch is all the way in before you turn the key, and then you only want to give it a little bit of gas, just because that kind of thing can happen." Well, life certainly would have been different had the garage been the only thing I wrecked that weekend, because I think I destroyed my relationship with Rod that weekend too. And I'm certainly sorry about that. But life goes on, and I'd see Randy in the neighborhood, and he was always very friendly to me. And I'm happy that I was able to have some kind of interaction with him briefly after my departure from my relationship with Rod in 1991. When my surprise return in 2010 certainly surprised me, and I was also sadly surprised to see the decline that had come upon Randy and the family. Perhaps the dimming of Randy's intellect and his spirit played a part in that. However, I had always remembered him as a kind person, and I think Rod had always remembered him as a kind person. So we wanted to maintain some kind of interaction with him, even if it was very one-sided. This is one of the few times where you get to do all the talking, and Randy would nod, and sometimes he would growl. It was amazing occasionally that one of the few sentences that he could utter was, "This is terrible," and "No." And I knew that that person, that strong, bright, kind person, was still in there, that he wanted to come out. And he needed to be surrounded by people who would listen and who would be kind. And Rod began this thing of inviting him over for breakfast on Sundays, and he would make this thing daddy eggs, and Randy and Richard would come, and Rod would make them fried eggs on fried turkey, and we would have eggs together, and we'd tell him about our day, and Zoe would tell him about our day, and he'd pet our dog, and it was a good interaction, and sometimes he was better than others, but I think it was meaningful to know that we were still there for him. And this time when he had come back from Florida, he had really had a very rough winter. Even though he was in Florida, he had a rough winter, just like all of us did up in the Northeast. And Susan knew his days were short and that the light was dimming from his eyes. And I was very insistent on wanting to go over as much as possible. And I'm very happy that we were there as much as we could have been on his last weekend. He was definitely struggling, definitely in pain, and I'm having the thought of an analogy to his passing. He's such a man of the sea, and I would see him and his face would be like a lighthouse, and sometimes I would see light in his eyes and sometimes the light would go out, just like the lighthouse was sweeping. And I feel like Randy is in a boat that has now gone beyond the horizon, and he has seen the last pass of his lighthouse. And I'm happy that he was in his bed. I'm happy that he was there with his wife. I'm happy that the man who was there helping was kind and did all he could. And that, Randy has created a legacy of people who care about him and people who respect him. And if all of us could follow that example, I think our life would be well lived too. So, thank you.